But we've said nothing over here about why anybody should believe in the unique authority of Jesus Christ in the first place. And so now I want to come to that. And really, this has two components. But I'm going to spell out 8 different things that go into these two aspects of the case. All right? Here are the 2 components. First, we need good reasons to believe that God exists. And then we need good reason to believe that God has spoken. How many of you remember the name Francis Schaeffer? When I was a kid, my dad had every book that Francis Schaeffer ever wrote. The ink was wet on the page when a new book of Francis Schaeffer's arrived at our house. He just consumed Francis Schaeffer. Now, I remember one of the books that Francis Schaeffer wrote had a very intriguing title called He is There and He is Not Silent. Any of you remember that book? He is there and He is not silent. That's my thesis. God exists and He has spoken. And guess what? He doesn't even stutter. Okay? Now that's the case. Now how do you make the case? You argue first for the existence of God, and then you argue that God has spoken. He has declared Himself. He has manifested Himself to human beings so that they can identify Him correctly. They can get God's solution to the human condition right. Not because they figured it out, but because God told them. And what He told them, they would never figure out if they were left on their own. It's that fantastic. So what we do is we argue first that God exists. There's reason to believe that God exists. I think the best way to do that is to look for an explanation of the origin of the universe. If the universe had a beginning, and it's not my purpose here tonight to argue that it does, I think somebody else has either made that argument or is going to make that argument in this series. I believe the universe did have a beginning. I think it can be argued. If that's right, then it makes sense to believe that God exists as the cause of the beginning of the universe. Now the question is, so what? There are lots of people who believe that God exists, but they think it makes no difference at all. I told you I'm going to be at the University of Northern Iowa for the next couple of days. Students, Christian students across that camp, have been going across that camp. About 90 or 100 Christian students have gone out all over that campus for the last couple of weeks taking surveys of the religious beliefs of their peers. And one of the things they told me over the phone the other day is that they discovered that a lot of their peers believe that God exists but thinks it makes no difference. They think it makes no difference. And I think that's fairly common in our culture today. They can't get past this step right here. That's pretty thin. How do you get beyond that? How do you get to the point where you think not only does God exist, but it really matters? It gives hope. You think about what it is that God has created. We owe the beginning of the universe to God's creative activity. What else then do we owe to God's creative activity? The entire physical universe. Its special structure, its design, its complexity, and non-physical things like minds, human souls. And these things, by the way, can be studied, not by the methods of the sciences, but they can be studied. This is very easy to illustrate. You know your mind. You can tell me the contents of your mind. You can make first-person reports about what you're thinking. Now, how do you do that? Is it through physics? Are you practicing are you just doing a little chemical analysis there? Did you dissect your brain and, examine the physical things? No. It's not even a brain event that you're reporting. You're reporting an event of your mind. You can tell me what you're thinking about. You can tell me what your intentions are. You can tell me if your big toe on your left foot is in pain. And you can do that without the methods of the scientists. It's called introspection. And we can have knowledge of non-physical reality, just as we can have knowledge of physical reality. And what we know is remarkable. It's complex. It's sophisticated. It's awesome. The mind, the soul, the non-physical stuff that we know intuitively and introspectively is no less magnificent and impressive than the physical system of the universe itself. Now, to whom do we owe the existence of these things, the organization of these things, the arrangement of these things this way? God. So design at both the material and the immaterial levels tell us something about God. They tell us that we're dealing with a magnificent artist, an intelligence. You got a machinist, an engineer, an artist. I had an uncle who worked for IBM, and his job with IBM was to take designs by other engineers and redesign the design before the thing was manufactured so the thing could be fixed if it ever broke. So you see, one engineer or a team of engineers would come up with the concept, and then they'd build the thing on paper. They'd have a paper airplane, in the sense that it was all sketched out on paper, schematized on paper. And if you built it according to those specifications, it would fly. But if it broke, you had to build another one. Or it'd be very expensive to fix. So his job was to go back and redesign it so that things that would break could be fixed. And you have, now that is, God functions like that at the front end of the universe, building things so that what we have now is a functioning universe where human beings like you and I, with bodies and souls intimately related in a baffling way, can flourish. Now, I've just referred to us. We are special. There's no question about that. We are special. We are moral. We think about our lives. We think about our deaths. We buried our cat a few months ago, and it was a sad day in our life. But he didn't anticipate his death. We saw it coming. I don't think he did. And I don't think he ever pondered the objective value of his existence the way we do. And we ponder the objective value of his existence. That's how special we are. All right, now we have a situation on our hands. We are situated in a world created by God with the capacity for flourishing physically and spiritually, in the sense that we can use our minds, we can enter into a relationship with each other. That's what I mean by spiritually. Now why? You get a description of the human condition where you see that there's a lot of good because of what God did, but there are a lot of problems. We're confused morally. We want to know what happens when we die. We want to know what our lives are for, where our lives are going, what we should be living for. We want to know why there's evil in the world and why we suffer. We don't have answers to these questions. But if we think about these questions with this knowledge of God in the background, we have a different attitude than we do if we just leave God out of the picture. And that is, maybe God is interested in the human condition. I think that this stuff at levels 1 and 2 tells us to expect that God has a remedy for the human condition, or if he has one, that God cares. And that if there is a solution, God has come up with one because he cares. Now this is an expectation. It's a hypothesis. It's grounded in evidence, but it's not decisive. It's open-ended. So the question is, does God care the way it seems he must? If you hear reported in the news that the mother of 2 preschool children has just been apprehended as the prime suspect for the deaths of those 2 children, what do you think? You hear the story told, how she got in her car and she drove them over a cliff and jumped out of the car, and they went into the river and the car went upside down and they got stuck in there and they drowned. And you think, Their mother did this? Their mother did this? And you are completely baffled by that, aren't you? You think, mothers don't do that. It is totally unnatural for a mother to behave that way towards her offspring. Now, we are the work of His hands. What is it reasonable to expect of Him with respect to the human situation? Interest, care, concern, the production of a solution, a remedy. And so, we have the expectation that God cares and that He has a solution to the human condition. Right? Now we have not only reason to believe that He is there, but now reason to believe that He is not silent. He is there and He is not silent. All right? So what do? We listen. We try to tune in to whatever wavelength that God is broadcasting His solution to the human condition, if, as we suspect, He really is. And as we do that, we research the various religious traditions of the world, and most of what we hear is static. Most of what we hear is confusion. Most of what we hear is not all that appealing. It really doesn't answer to the fundamental needs of the human situation at all. Some people, I don't know how they get worked up about being absorbed into the one and losing their consciousness. This is what they live for, nirvana. And I don't know how they get excited about that. It pales in comparison with resurrection life. Now that's what we crave. Is what we crave available? That's what we want to know. And so we keep trying the dial, testing for that wavelength where God's broadcast comes through loud and clear. But you see, we will never know as we examine various religious claims, unless God does something else to confirm that one of those is His. One of those is His. How does He do that? He does it by producing an event that can only be adequately explained as God's own action in the world. In other words, He produces a miracle. He produces a miracle. That would be the confirmation we require to be sure that this religion and not that one is God's religion. This is what He's trying to say. This is His solution to the human situation. Listen to that. All right? So we look for confirmation. Confirmation of God's own remedy. Confirmation that God has spoken with a miracle. A miracle is like a divine signature on the bottle of medicine that you get from the pharmacist. It says, here is the prescription, follow these directions, and you will get better. Here's the prognosis. Signed, somebody with credentials, somebody with authority, somebody who should know, somebody you can trust. The form that signature takes on the bottle that contains the solution to the human condition is God's own. And it takes the form of the miracle of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The miracle of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. A historically confirmable event that cannot be explained. If you allow that the grave was empty and that Jesus Christ appeared alive again after He was dead, if you allow that happened, you have very little choice but to allow that it is a miracle. And that is to say, God did it. God entered into human history and did something for human beings. People who are not prepared to accept that don't even allow that the tomb was empty. And they argue against the evidence that the tomb was empty, and they argue against the evidence that He was seen alive again. But the evidence is strong. The evidence is there. And I think there might be a seminar in this series on the resurrection. I'm not sure about that. There has been in the past. But certainly, the evidence is there. The resurrection. Why do I believe in the unique authority of Jesus Christ? This is why. I cannot fathom God creating this without taking a long-standing interest in the human condition. Now, if I expected God to care and I went out and searched the world over for God's revelation of a remedy and I came up dry, then I might give up hope. I might give up hope. It would still be incredible, wouldn't it? It'd be like a mother drowning her children. It's incredible. Okay, but it happens. Has God let us down? Are we His cosmic orphans? Or does He care as one would expect? When we go in search of the answer to that question with expectation and conviction, what do we find? What we find, if our gaze ever comes upon the person of Jesus Christ, is God's broadcast, His signal. And it's like all those radios, old-fashioned radios with the newfangled lights that light up when you get nice stereophonic sound. Right? You can get static on the edges. But you see, when you tune to the frequency where Christianity and the gospel of Jesus Christ is broadcast, that signal comes through loud and clear as God's own. Because it is confirmed now by three things. We expect God to care, and if this is His solution, it's fantastic. It's beyond anything we would ever imagine. Did we really expect God to come down and join us and experience our misery? That's even more than we expected. So that we have the confirmation of Christianity because of its remarkable satisfaction of our expectation. And then we have the distinctive message of Christianity. All of the details about how God is taking the initiative. And He is doing a work in the world. First through the Jews and then through one of their own. The person of Jesus Christ. And all of that trumped by the miracle to which no other miracle claim can be even compared if it was true. The miracle of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Not to mention the miracle of new birth and the life of the resurrected Lord in His own. The testimony of the saints who persist after persecution and resistance and ridicule up to the present century. God is there. He is not silent. He has produced a revelation. He doesn't even stutter. Some of you have Bibles in your laps. You can open that book and see what God has to say. Now, this, I think, is the final evidence that Christianity is the truth. For my money, if that's what God is like at the top of that scale, it makes perfect sense that only one thing is really the truth. This cacophony of religious confusion, cognitive dissonance resulting at every level, is God's answer to the human condition? What could be less likely? We want a precise diagnosis. If you find out that you have a cancer in your body, you don't want to mess around. You want authoritative physicians examining you, diagnosing your situation, recommending a procedure. and giving you a good prognosis. Can we expect any less from God? Part of the problem of the human condition is the welter of religions in the world today. Thank God that one religion today still stands up and says, but you know what? This is the truth. As Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. The narrowness and exclusiveness of Christianity is not a liability, it is a virtue. It is exactly what the doctor ordered. Father, we thank you this evening for conviction that you give us about these things. Your Spirit bears witness with ours. What a wonderful thing it is to hear the gospel preached and to realize how utterly sensible it is. I pray tonight that you would use the things that we've studied. We've looked at some hard issues. Some of these things just generate more questions. And yet you give us hope. Would you, Lord, shake us from our apathy and our indifference that comes from just living in an atmosphere where all we breathe is pluralism and relativism and confusion. Give us the fresh air of your Spirit that confirms the truth of this gospel and makes us powerful witnesses to the same in the lives of other people who need your truth. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.